most of you are probably brain dead by now, so I don't know how this will go for you. But my presentation is on scripting to save time, and so I'm just going to look at a few times where maybe you should consider VI scripting, look into it a little more, kind of the trade-offs of when is it worth the investment or when is it a giant waste of time, and hopefully go through some of those things. Not going to waste a ton of time introducing myself, but I'm Daniel Coons. I work for a company called TSC, based out of Bloomington, Indiana. I've been doing LabVIEW development professionally for about 10 years and doing scripting. I think my introduction to scripting, wow, it is like way louder to me all of a sudden.
Sounds great back
here. Yeah, it works for everybody else. Yeah, so good. My introduction to scripting was when I took the Advanced Architectures class in like 2011. And there is one slide in there that says, hey, there's this thing called scripting where you can use LabVIEW code to write LabVIEw code. And I was like, hold on, what now? That sounds awesome. And so I started looking at the website, trying to find stuff. If you search VI scripting, that's a hard thing to find much for. You always have to stick LabVIEW on there to make sure that it knows what you're talking about when you're trying to use Google. But you can find some stuff to kind of hack things together a lot of times as a starting point. I wanted to continue the Our Giants Are Female, good way to close this out as well. Thing that Fabiola has kind of started and pushed in a lot of these presentations. I think it's an awesome thing to do. So the person I picked is Mae Jemison here. A couple of reasons why I picked her. She has her bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Stanford. I started off as a chemical engineer in college and did not complete as a chemical engineer, so I have some identification for some of that. She also, of course, was bored after she graduated from Stanford and said, I'm going to go to medical school also. So went and got her MD from Cornell, and she was a leader in the Peace Corps for a few years in Sierra Leone and Liberia. Accepted into the astronaut program. I mean, this is kind of a crazy resume of jumping to different things. And then was the first black female in space in the mission in 1992. So I thought that was a good person to highlight here. All right, so there may be a lot of other things that you would want to add to this list. And as I listened to the presentation, some of these things were kind of key things people were talking about. Some things people, again, would probably add to them. But, what is the role of an architect? And I think that's the thing that we all kind of walk away from here. Some of us, several years, I've come to this and thought, do I need to go get a master's degree in computer science after listening to these presentations so I can understand what's going on a little bit more? Trying to understand what is our role. So really kind of that high level, we're in charge of the architecture, right? It's in the name. We're kind of building the backbone for development projects, selecting design patterns, selecting the frameworks to use, helping empower the other developers on our team or ourselves to create those applications, doing things in a modular way, scalable way. And a lot of that is our role. I liked Dimitri's presentation yesterday where he kind of gave the analogy of us being kind of Sherpas. We're guides to other people on our teams. We're guides to our customers. We're kind of the experts that they look to for making some of these choices. A lot of time this also comes with managing projects. So you get to a point in your career where you're not just the person sitting there developing all the time. You also have to start taking cost, schedule, budget, progress, all that into account as you go through your projects. Present those things, present bad news to people, present good news to people. Sometimes all of that comes in as well. So another thing that is kind of a big part of the role of architect is to create design patterns and create tools to aid developers. So that's kind of what I was focusing on for this presentation specifically. And like I said, I'm sure all of you could come up with different rules or roles and things that could kind of fall under this. All right. So as architects, we kind of build that foundation. We look to build something stable that can be built upon later on, that will be sustainable over time, right? We want to make sure that we're creating code that can be used throughout, whatever the lifetime of our project is, probably beyond what we ever intended it to be in a lot of cases, right? A lot of times we start from that design of, okay, I want this, I know what it is today, I need to think about what it's going to be maybe 5, 10 years from now. If you work in government projects, Could be, you have to think of what it's going to look like 20 years from now, and how's it still going to handle challenges. So we have to smartly set up the foundation of how all that's going to work. And what I'm looking at here again is sort of the side of how do we create tools for our team members, ourselves, to help establish some of that and kind of build off of our architectures as we go on. All right, so another big thing of what we do is we save time. Okay, as you become more of an expert in your field, typically that means you can do things quicker than people who are kind of new to the product. So I go into a company, they have some people that have taken LabVIEW Core 1, 2, 3 or whatever in the past, but they can maybe make an application, but they need a lot of hand-holding. We're there to kind of build that quickly, build that structure for them, help them. Okay, so we help save time, help reduce cost, hopefully increase productivity. That's a lot of the goals, what we're trying to do. Right? But our other consideration is what about our cost? So that's where we have to start making some of these trade-offs. And when we look at things like scripting, the big question is identifying, is this worth my time to spend time on? How can I use this in the future and build off of it to make this useful for that time? All right, so that's kind of I'm going to show a few demos and slides of a few different ideas for scripting and where it can be used and how sloppy it can get sometimes, I will admit. But that's a big consideration. Is it worth the investment? Is it worth the time? How are we going to pitch this as something that, hey, if I do this work up front, what's it going to save us in the end? And that's a lot of the questions we ask in general. We've been talking about unit testing and running analyzer testing, and all those kind of things are upfront investment that we need to do to make sure that it's better long term. All right. So what is VI scripting? It's using VI Server to programmatically edit, modify, and create LabVIEW code. Gives you the set of tools. There are examples, all right, built into LabVIEW environment. There's in the example finder, if you search scripting, you can start with a lot of the templates that are there. Start building off of them if you want. They're not always necessarily done the best way. Sometimes it doesn't really matter. One thing that I found is really helpful to learn about VI scripting is to present about it and then ask Darren later on, what could I have changed? That's a super helpful way to learn. That's what I did last year. Sort of an added benefit I had. As the last person to go, I don't think that's going to happen today. But my lift is scheduled to pick me up like as soon as I'm done, so I don't know if I'll get that necessarily today. But what this does, it helps us to implement useful tools for developers. Whether they're on our team or maybe our customers who don't have as much experience as we do. Maybe we don't want them to have to follow the list of steps to do the thing every time, right? We can create VI scripting code for them to be able to make that a little more automated, a little better for them, right? And a big part of that is identifying the common steps that team members will take. So last year I presented on scripting in a project where we literally started out with a Word document that was like, do step 1 through 15 every time. And, as we started to look at that, we're like, well, that doesn't make sense. We could just do this with scripting as we learn more about it. It's like, okay, take this chunk and this chunk and this chunk and automate all that. So then now we're just telling them, hey, go click this button, and then you have what you need, all right? So one of the examples you can find in the example finder, and you can build off of it if you want, is maybe you create a VI from scratch. All right, so let me show an example of that, and we'll decide how useful this is. All right, so I'll show it first, this demo. We'll look at what it does, and then we'll kind of decide if this is a useful way to spend our time. So this is a VI that's being created programmatically. All right, I'll do this again so you can watch it run. Oops, not that one. This one here. All right, so I created this block diagram. I created these for loops. I wired false constants to it. I created a flat sequence structure and put text inside of its subdiagram label. And I spent a ridiculous amount of time doing this. One of the notes in there was, this was an irresponsible waste of my time. And it truly was. But I made a cool block diagram with a talking face, right? So not a lot of useful application for that aside from learning scripting. So let me look at what this took to make. Whoa, yeah, that's a lot of scrolling, first of all. That kind of happens with scripting code. Like I said, sometimes I get a little sloppy with it. It's a fun thing. It's just for me, right? So nobody else has to maintain this part. So we're creating new VIs. creating structures, I'm creating the while loops, getting references to those, passing these references around, turning on all this stuff. And I'm able to do this all programmatically. So practically useless what I just did, but we can learn from this and build off of what it could be useful for. Right? The thing that animates is actually kind of fun. Whoa. Still more of take the time, take my frame, show my sub-diagram label and put these labels in and change that over time. It was kind of a fun thing to do. I was trying to move the little stop terminals around to make it look like my eyeballs were moving around in my while loops there. But, you know, not really useful. All right, so conclusion from something like this is probably this. We don't have time for that. So there are examples in the example finder that are build a block diagram and put an add function down and put controls connected to it, right? You can do all of that with scripting. But does that make sense, right? That's kind of our trade-off. It's a good thing maybe to learn, but it's not a very useful application for what you're trying to do. All right? So here's another one. Maybe you have some kind of one-off that you need to do to save time overall. So how many times have you guys had to do something like this? We had to relink to SubVI. I had to change my pattern for whatever reason, right? I'm seeing a lot of head nods. We have to go, what I'm gonna have to do is everywhere I use that SubVI, I have to right click on it and say relink to SubVI to make sure that it matches back up, okay? If there's just a few instances, not too big of a deal. Okay, so let's look at that. Close this one here. And this is one that I actually did for a project, so this kind of helps a later point that I will make. Okay, so we have these two VIs here right now, currently. I have this one that's called I won't change, promise. All right, it has this connector pane. Everything's filled up in it, okay? But what if I need to add something to it? Right now I have it on this one sub-VI, not that big of a deal. If I had to change the connector pane, relinking to one sub-VI, probably not too painful. Okay, but what if I want to make a lot of copies of it? Give me a number, 24. Alright, so
just make it 8.
Yeah, just use 8. That's not big enough for it to be faithful. It's a multiple of 8 now, so I guess maybe I get the same benefit. So now I have that same sub-VI that I'm going to have to relink, and these 24. Does it start at 0? Starts at 0. Yes, 25 sub-VIs. Okay, I don't want to have to go and click on every one of those, relink them. Maybe this is code that I've already put somewhere. Maybe I've decided that I can't just bundle these things into a cluster for whatever reason. That's still going to break all those instances. We want all these things top level accessible. Okay, so if I want to add some kind of new numeric input to this thing, I see, oh man, I don't have any more connections on my connector pane that I can use. I'm definitely not going to wrap around to the right side. That's just not, I'll get my CLA revoked if somebody sees me do that. So I have to change the pattern here, change it to something a little more dense. Okay, now I can make this new change. Okay, good. Now I can use that numeric as a sub-VI. But when I go here, right, these are all broken. I need to relink all these. And I'm not going to go through and right click on all those. So what I learned is that anything that I can do in LabVIEW, I can pretty much do a scripting. Okay? So I have this VI here that goes and looks at that subfolder location. Okay, I can point this to wherever I need it to be. Say, look for all the VIs, look for the ones that have this sub-VI in their block diagram. That's called I won't change promise. Cast that to the sub-VI type. Use these scripting nodes here to actually change that, relink it, get all the labels back because it makes the labels weird for some reason. And then when I run this on all that code, that was a very short time. All right? Oh, of course it didn't work.
You're not doing a save.
Yeah, do some script. Yeah.
Look at that.
I'm gonna watch your code.
That indeed constantly works.
That's why, see, that's what I said. You bring Darren and everything's good.
You need to do both of them.
Outfit, yeah. Let's use quick drop too while we do this.
Wires and VI, not stuff, yeah. Run backseat drive. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Save for free.
There we go.
It might take a little
It'll
longer.
take a little longer.
Yeah.
But look at that, we can relink them all. Right? And there's another thing you can save time with quick drops, so watch all those presentations. Right? So now we went through there, that whole folder location, I pointed to it and I was able to save all those, relink them, everything's good there. And I did do this on a project before, and it took a small amount of time. Right? There's not really a lot that was in there. I think the first time I probably did this, I had to play around with it a few times to figure out the best way to accomplish it. But then now, when I go to do this for the demo, I can use that same thing over again. If I find myself with this problem in the future, I can reuse this again in kind of this reuse theme, reuse my scripting code to relink these sub-VIs automatically. So I just save myself a bunch of time there. All right, so we did that. All right, another one is what if we want to programmatically add cases to our case structure? So what I have here is a situation that is kind of like a factory pattern VI. I have some kind of build function. In this case, I actually did something similar for a customer where instead of having a configuration file that tells me which one of my child plugin classes I need to use, I'm using a case structure with an enum that tells them which one to use. Right? Makes it a little simpler for them to maintain over time and that kind of thing. Okay? So steps I would need to take if I create a new child class, my measure is kind of my top level inheriting class where everything's coming from. Right now I have a voltage, I have a current measurement. If I want to add a power measurement to this, okay, what are my steps that I need to take? I need to go and I need to take the measurements enum there, that's a type def, I have to update my type def, add a new item to that, right? I'm also going to have to add to my case structure here, my new case, put in my new class constant, we get our cast and everything would work out here. Right? So the thing that I'll kind of point out here, the VI that I'm using, I showed it before, I'll show it again in this code in a second, is this tref find object by label.vi. This is the thing that I learned from Darren last year. I was not using before. This is a better way to search for objects. So if we know what their names are, we can find them a little easier. If we don't, there's other functions that we can use to kind of look through our block diagrams, get references, and kind of figure it out from our code.
You get the hidden gems.
Yeah. If you get the hidden gems package and install that, that'll be in your subpalettes as well. So you can find that a little easier. It's buried in, like I showed there, vi.lib utility in this LLD file here. Right? So what we do, this kind of scripting code here shows you, I'm first finding the enum. So I know where it exists on disk. I find that enum. I get the list of those strings. I add to it. And then again, I do actually save this outside of this VI. But you kind of have to figure out this weirdness of the control still is a front panel. Right? So my target is the front panel for where I'm searching for a control called measurements. I get a reference to it and I tell it that it's an enum. I get the list and I can append to the list and then save it and then everything's happy there. All right? So programmatically I can do those steps that I would take normally manually. All right? Updating the build VI. So I had showed here in this slide previously, I have this note here. This case structure is showing the label of it so that I can easily access it with scripting. That's just kind of a tip to use there. So I showed the label of this, called it class choice. So then now when I go to search for it, I'm searching for a case structure called class choice on the block diagram in this VI, looking at the frames, adding a frame by duplicating, finding the thing that was in there and replacing it. All right, those are all steps that I would take normally in my manual completion of this kind of task and figuring out how to do it programmatically. And again, a lot of this is like playing around with it, looking at these examples, figuring out how it's done. That crazy thing where I was animating stuff earlier, you can wire VIs together, you can call the block diagram cleanup tool, all that stuff you can do with scripting. Right? So it's just kind of looking through these different options, figuring out what these names of these classes to search for as well can be kind of a fun challenge. I don't know how the best place to find some of that information is, but it is kind of playing around sometimes. All right, so I guess the thing I didn't highlight before as well, anything that you see with the turquoise color there, this, I guess maybe that's like a cyan blue, those are the scripting functions. So once you turn scripting on, when you look at your property node list, it gets bigger. You'll see anything you select like this as a scripting function. All right. All right, so let's add a new case here. So inside of my measure class, which is my top level here, currently I have in this enum, I have current, voltage, and thing 1. Right, those are my 3 measurement types. I have cases for each of those. So we can see all those here in our list. I built this new one called power. This is a child measure that I want to add into here, add into my code. All right, so steps I could take, I could open up this enum, add power to it, go to this case structure, duplicate that. All right, or I could run my scripting tool, pick the class that I want. All right, run that. Now I come back in here. We have power inside of here. All right, my type def's been updated. We see voltage, current, thing 1, power. My case structure now has the power case with the correct child constant class stuck inside of there. All right, so that was again all scripting that from those slides that I showed before. Found the enum, got the reference to it, got the strings, added to it, saved it. This VI, edited it, same thing. All right, now the kind of the caveat here, and that's why this note's here. If I change the name of this case structure, my code breaks. Okay, so if somebody comes in and modifies it, that breaks. So maybe I want to come up with another way to do this. I could just find the different structures on the palette, figure out, or on the block diagram, figure out which one is the one that I'm interested in, and then do it from there. You don't have to use the name; just makes it a little cleaner for some of the application. All right, so that's kind of a nice thing. I could programmatically do that. But a thing that I may want to do is take that another step further. Okay, so you can create your own project templates. Now this is a little bit more complicated, but in version of LabVIEW, unknown to me off the top of my head, they added project templates in here, right? And it added the ability for us to be able to create those. So now when I have my create project, I hit that button inside of LabVIEW when I launch it, I can have a list of whatever tools that I've created inside of this list. All right, so how do we make that happen? I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about that, but I did provide some links on where I learned how to do this and have kind of hacked together some things. All right, so there's kind of 2 main components that you need. One goes in the metadata folder, so wherever LabVIEW gets installed, there's a project templates metadata folder inside of there. This is an XML file that defines the wizard calls. All right, so we have all of these components inside of here. Nobody told me I was on that view. There we go. So we have all of these different components for what's inside of our XML. There's a link at the end of my presentation to the site on the NI webpage that tells you kind of what each of these meta tags is. But basically, this is kind of defining where everything exists. Okay. So we have the title of what it's going to be called, the class. That's my metadata class, so there's an inheritance there. And best piece of advice that I can give is to look at how the active framework does it. You can pull all of their code for doing this and then kind of look at that setup and build off of it. The first time I made an example, that's exactly what I did. I kept going and looking at it, going, how in the world are they accomplishing this? Coming back to my code, trying to do a small thing. Back to active framework, looking at how I did it, trying to understand that. All right, so there's a class you have to inherit from. You set that up, tell it where yours is specifically, so you can put it in this folder. Then it's going to allow you to add in description, any filters for searching that you want to add inside of there. We can add submenus and all that stuff inside the Create project. We have all that power defined in this XML. We tell it what the project is that we're actually copying, so this comes into a big thing that's really relevant for scripting. Instead of building code from scratch like I did earlier, the general recommendation and the probably the only way to do it that you should be doing it is to build off of templates. Right? So what I did, and I'll show this as well, is I built a template project that has my class that inherits from the measurement class, that has the methods that I want to implement. And so when I call this wizard, all of that gets copied over to the new location where a user defines, and then I have scripting code that kind of manipulates it from there. Right? So where the project is located, where it's going to be found, if I have some cool fancy image, mine is not fancy and cool. It's just something I made in paint.net in like 3 seconds. But it does have a little case that I found from some symbol. All right. And then there's a couple modes here. And again, you have to read the documentation on the NI website for what that is. I think it's kind of black magic myself. I've had some mixed results with trying other of the custom VI modes. But it is what it is. All right, and then there's a sort priority that kind of shows you where it shows up in the list. So I can actually make mine on top if I wanted to, like what it's doing here, I put at the top of the list. So we can define that as well. All right, so then the other thing that you need is the source. And this is where we have kind of our 2 folders broken out. I have my top level, that's the project that I'm pointing it to. I have my temporary class, and I'm going to perform scripting actions on it once I get it. Then in the scripting folder is where all this junk exists that I have to make this happen, right? Now, one thing that's very useful is if you go digging in some of these folders, there are template VITs, files that you can use to create this thing called the spec page, and there's examples on how to do it. So there is a little bit inside of there that you can kind of build off of, but like I said, a lot of the pain is figuring it out the first time and then kind of manipulating it from there for future uses. All right, so then when you run it, I get this nice little thing that looks just like any other project template that I'm using from NI. I can name my project, and I'll show this as well. I can edit the icon. This is like my favorite part, is having the icon editor that automatically puts stuff in there. But that's just kind of a weird thing that I get excited about. All right, so let's take a look at that. All right, so we'll notice again I have current, power, thing 1, voltage. Those are my different measurement types right now. When I hit create project, we will see wizard come up, and my new project template is at the top of the list. Case structure demo. I say next. I'm going to call this one thing 2 because I have thing 1. I have to tell it where my parent exists, so I can choose inheritance for it in my scripting code. Like I said, I can edit, overlay here. So I get my little icon editor, and I can put A2. Yeah, that fits. All right. Wait, they're red and white, right? Yeah, so let's color that. Correct color. Yeah, there we go. Thing 2. Yeah. Get Dr. Seuss. All right, if I wanted to do the class control, I could do that as well. I'll just open it up and do it and not make it fancy. All right, red border, sure. All right, so now that's going to get applied to my class constant, and my class will get created. Okay, when I finish this, what it's actually going to do is it's going to find my project. That's kind of the next step that it does. That project I had opened up earlier, it's going to add my new class to it. It's going to edit that enum. It's going to update my build. At the end, it pops up my class. I could kind of make it pop up whatever I wanted to, but I had these methods that were in there that I defined. If I wanted to put some more functionality in here, I could do that as well. It's just kind of to whatever extent you want to take it. But what's nice there is I already have a starting point. I don't have to create these overrides. They were part of my template that got built automatically. All right. So let me go now back to here, to my project, where hopefully all this is living now. Okay, so now we see thing 2 is there. I look at properties, inheritance of this. I'm inheriting for measurement. All this was done with this scripting code. And then my measure build. Yep, thing 2 is there. Thing 2 inside of here, right? And so this is extremely useful for, again, if you have customers that are less experienced, developers that are less experienced, where they don't want to go through all the steps of creating a class, setting the inheritance, creating the overrides for all these VIs. You want to give them something where they can just click the button and get the thing that they can start filling out, right? So that was, again, a thing that I went through the pain of figuring out the project templates so that I can hand off something for a little bit more easy for my customer to digest and use. Because when I first told them that we were doing object-oriented for what we were doing, they kind of got a scared face as their first step, and then I gave them the list of steps, and they were like, that doesn't make me feel a lot better. And I was like, well, let me make it even easier for you, and then you just focus on these components, right? So that is, again, kind of our role, is getting to that top level here. Right, and I can show, I'll get to it kind of quick here. That code I said exists. You go to your LabVIEW version. That's what I meant to. All right, it's the metadata folder is the one. This is my XML that I created that I was kind of showing on the screen before. This is the source file where everything exists, right? My case structure demo. So those are kind of the starting points. So you create like a template project. I have a template class here, and then I run all this crazy scripting code behind the scenes that you can open up. And like I said, the actor framework is a good example. There's also in the links at the end of my presentation, links to the NI page that kind of explains it. Inside of there, Elijah Carey had done a post about this at one point that I kind of pulled a lot from as well. But there is, like once it copies that stuff over, again, there's still a little bit of work that you have to do to make this happen. But it does, again, end up saving time overall. And that's kind of the trade-off you have to keep kind of thinking through. All right? So then our next thing, quick drop. All right, use quick drop for sure. Use the extra quick drop shortcuts. This was the old list. I think a couple years ago, even more were added to like the built-in ones. The other thing that you can do is use your own shortcuts. Right, so you can leverage the community. There's a site on the NI website that I also have a link for. I don't know, it's probably on the LabVIEW wiki, but I'm not sure. For all of the quick drop from the community, very useful ones that people have developed and gone out and shared. Some extra quick drop shortcuts that you can have and use that are very useful to have. And so there's templates for this as well. And then where they live is in this resource dialog quick drop. So if you had some code, again, you're repeating, maybe you figure out kind of scripting for that to make the quick drop shortcuts. All right, so I will show, thinking through the trade-offs is kind of the big portion here. So how much time will it take to make the tool versus how much time is it going to save? And that's something you kind of have to debate sort of all along as you go through this process of thinking through your costs, thinking through the time you have on a project, being able to pitch that and say, here's where the investment is going to get a return for you. And then, like I said, build off of examples is kind of a good starting point. Just kind of learn from your own mistakes over time. That's something that I've done. I got something working and then kind of go to the next step. How do we make it better? You know, kind of going through that iterative process. And then go after those repetitive tasks is another thing as well. Right? And then you can get to a point, let me show a project here. Let me get LabVIEW open quickly because I have a little bit of time. Let me make sure I don't already have this example. All right, so I have a project. This is like a major scripting thing that we did. And so I have this project that will read a file that defines all the tests that I'm going to create, all of the limits for those tests, create files, create a project, create a build spec based on kind of a dynamic read of that file. All right, so I don't have this one that exists right now. I tell it what my test type is, and I can look for this file. I wasn't actually prepared to show this, so I'm kind of winging it here. Luckily, I know where all this stuff resides. All right, so I have this file that kind of defines my UUT, all this kind of general information about it, what all the limits and tests that it sees inside of here. I can create templates, customized templates for my tests, those kind of things. Not super cool there. I can create sequences of those tests. All right, and so what this thing does, once it finishes, again, using scripting, this is kind of taking it to a very extreme level that's been a lot more time than probably you have on most projects. Builds all this structure for you on that file. So I can go now, whichever folder that put that right here. Yes, so it was that one I deleted, thankfully. All right, so this whole folder structure, all these tests, folders, classes, XML files, all created off of the scripting code. All right, so this is an extremely powerful tool because this is now something that we took. Again, doing this manually would probably take me a few hours, few days, maybe, I don't know, for all of these files to create them all. But now with scripting, a little bit of work up front, click the button, generate all this code, build spec and everything is pretty awesome. All right, so I have links that are definitely very helpful to look at. So the community quick drops I mentioned, I created bit.lys for these, but did not take as much time as everyone else did to give them nice names at the end. I just put on the little default, whatever it gave me. Becky Linton is a person that I learned from NIW 2016 presentation about project templates. That was an extremely useful starting point. Nate Warren did one, a presentation that I also found that was more detailed and very good. The NI tutorial page, all these things are good resources to kind of think through those different situations for what you may need there. Question? Yes?
You're missing a very useful link.
Yes.
If you're going to do template-based scripting, you should be using the CodeGen engine that ships with LabVIEw. That's used by the DACA system. It'll script way faster than you can do it yourself.
I don't even know what that is, but if I knew what that was, I would have it.
It is documented on, trying to remember where. I put it out there about 10 years ago.
Hey, okay.
Google Files actually promised to me that we have the link for the
Okay, so that link is one of the ones that's at the LabVIEW wiki. That's why there's like a few that I was going to put on here, and the LabVIEW wiki page for VI scripting has your presentation, has I think one that Darren did at NIW a year or two ago that talks about templates and those kind of things. So
you can edit the same file, the other ones that are not there.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, there you go. All right, and this is not scripting conclusion, but conclusion of CLA Summit project, and thanks to Jim and Training for helping me figure out a very annoying thing for this. Make this better. I have concluded my show with fireworks. And this is a good joke for all the government people. It is the end of the fiscal year, so happy New Year 2020 to all of you government project workers. All right, any other questions? Awesome. Thank you.